Earlier today, I was upstairs in the storeroom and looking through some of the boxes of things that I want to dispose of and either sell or throw away. And I came across this beautiful batch of Filofaxes, something very much from the 1980s when there was that hustle culture pre-digital activity. At the time, if you had one of these, you thought you were busy and active, but also organized because you could track everything in the different sections of your Filofax and use that to pull data out quickly. Obviously pre-computers, pre-laptops, but a great time to be busy and active. And having a Filofax, oh, it smells gorgeous, the actual leather on this. Having a Filofax was pretty much a status symbol, having also perhaps one of those large, almost brick-sized telephones. It was very much a part of 1980s culture. Not so much a random video today, but a video in which I've started to look at my move from using simple ring binders with a 6-ring divider here, and that will take a variety of plastic pockets, graph paper or mathematical paper as some people refer to it, little to-do lists and things that can be added to the Filofax binder and that give you an easy sense of tracking what's happening. My first employment after university was in the 1980s when I worked for IBM, one of the big computer companies, and then I went to work for one of the English high street banks, albeit for its international division. And in those days, everybody carried a Filofax, and these are just a selection of probably, I think, 8 that I've got. These happen to be all in black leather or faux leather. This one is a Filofax own brand product. I think you can see the marker here for Filofax stamped into the leather. But these were products that we had given to us when we joined the bank, and we were expected really just to maintain track and to keep record of everything. But this is a typical Filofax from the 1980s, Filofax personal organizer. This one's called a domino. Put little pockets for credit cards, maybe for a travel card or an ID card for a corporate work environment, a ruler, day planning pages, month by month. This one's 2016, so I must have picked up these refills years after actually using this as a main work diary and a work agenda planner. Look at this, little sections from 1 to 6 for projects that you could work on. What have I got here? Ah, this is interesting. From, it looks like October of that year, some little personal cash records. So this is just showing my balance. My balance is £1,400, and then some expenditure from that. I can see some rent payments, utility bills, money to the savings account, an Airbnb expenditure. But the thing is, you were always carrying these anyway. They weren't easy to fit in a pocket. These are quite bulky. That's certainly maybe an inch, almost 3 centimeters thick. So you couldn't get away with carrying that in your jacket pocket. Something like this one, much easier. This one you can see I bought from Boots the Chemist, a high street shop in England. Now it's part of the Walgreens Boots Alliance, a business which I really love. And again, you've got similar little things. You can see how long I've had this one for how young my kids were in the photograph. Some little motivational $1 million bills, obviously joke money or party money, not real. But a map of the London Underground. These were in every single Filofax that you would buy in those days. Maybe in other countries they would have a different metro system or a different train network. But it was useful and it was part of everybody's planning tool. And that's what a Filofax has always been, a planning tool. And I've always loved them for that reason. Here I've kept 3 of a selection of tabs. So I've got a diary, a financial tab and a projects tab. And let's see what I've kept in those. So that one, this is for 2008, had various international holidays and public bank holidays in those countries. Under the financial, I've actually got some affirmations in here, which is interesting because I've always used positive affirmations and I've always found them immensely helpful just to keep me on track and to remind me of some of the things that were important or some of the aspects of life that I was maybe struggling with, if I was feeling low in confidence or lacking in, I don't know, some aspects of personal skills, I would often turn to a book, a self-help book, and look at aspects that might help me and copy those into my planner. So here, for example, it says, notes to myself, and I wrote this on the 4th of November 2007. So we're going back 17 years ago, and this is from a DVD by Neil Walsh, an Abundance DVD. So I've just made some notes. You just need to get that there is no place where I end and you begin. There is only one of us in the world. Describing the time that he awoke in the middle of the night and at a time when he was in bad health, broken relationships, no money, a dark time, a time of sadness and despair. So I've obviously taken some of that from perhaps the introduction to that DVD. Here's an interesting comment. If we don't change the construction of our thinking, then we don't have the chance to create the life that we want. That's hugely important. So much of what I write in my journals is about the things that I want to achieve or to accomplish. And I think that's really important. Here's a warning comment for us all. When I am righteous, I lose my compassion for others. And another one here on this left-hand page. As I give of the magic that lies within me, I attract all the magic that is outside of and around me. You might think these are flowery and puffy little things, but I've found value from them, and I've often, as I've read through books, worked out important things for me that allow me to feel better as a human being. Here we go. Everything I create fulfills me. I know the essence of what I want and I get it. Interesting that I've ripped out and thrown away lots of the diary aspects of my Filofaxes here, and I've just saved some pretty blank pages, which I can always use when I'm journaling, when I'm adding to my current thinking, perhaps in these more standard A6 hardbound moleskin notebooks, but I can use the content from the Filofaxes. And if anything, I've got lots of blank pages. Here's one from 19 years ago, 2005. Typical standard layout. Pockets for cards, integrated sheets that I would just buy in a local stationery store, wherever I was, maybe at a train station, in a high street. It would have been at a W.H. Smith branch. Obviously, one of my younger sons in those days had started using this for himself. So he's got little jokes in here. Where do Eskimo school kids read joke books? Behind the icicle sheds. Ha ha. Very funny. Yucky chuckles. Did you hear the joke about bad breath? You don't want to. It stinks. What do you call a man with no arms and no legs hanging on a gallery wall? Art. These are terrible, but very much of their time and very much of a little boy, 6 or 7 years old at that time, reading and using his dad's Filofax. Then I've got some other things in here. I've got contact details. Obviously, I'm talking to editors or people with different ideas and tracking with dates the conversations that take place. On the 23rd of December in 2005, I went to see Jack and the Beanstalk pantomime at the Harrogate Theatre. Lots of pages here which I can take out and throw away or recycle and put on the fire, and lots of blank pages that can still be used for future journaling. I'll keep the blanks and I will get rid of these, but it is interesting to see how that process worked. One of the things that strikes me looking at these books is how we would always keep the address details of people in our Filofax. Obviously, I've long since cleared that out, thrown those away, and I've digitized or added to a digital contacts list those details. But this is an address book. This is one I've had for years. It's got my home address from the old days in it. Looks like my sister wrote our school address in here one day when I wasn't looking. But friends from childhood, friends who I've long lost contact with, people who I've written to and their addresses have changed. What's this? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I've forgotten this totally. Here's a message from a Frenchman called Francois. Dear Mr. Sturgeon, you left part of your luggage in my car last Thursday. I think you remember our trip from Poitiers to Bordeaux. For next time, may I tell you, try to be careful with your luggage, especially if the drivers might be too tired. Check if you don't forget something in his car. I hope your friend will send you back your coat. Good luck. Have nice trips in South America. François Vervel, and his address in Paris. I remember that. My goodness. I was hitchhiking from Paris to Bordeaux, and then from Bordeaux my intention was to make my way around the edge of the Pyrenees and down to stay with friends in Madrid. And I left a red coat in his car. It was a beautiful old Peugeot, I remember, and it had the most glorious illuminated dashboard. But I left my coat in his car. I was staying with an English girl whose mother lived in our village in England and was a friend of my parents. And so I managed to get my coat back. He left it with them the following day after I had already left and gone on towards Madrid. And we had correspondence for a couple of years, and then I forgot to write to him. And when I was in Mexico, I wrote to him from my home in San Cristobal, down on the border with Guatemala. And my mother rang me a few months later, and she had had a message, a letter in French, from the mother of François Vervel. This is where he used to live, Rue de Bagnolet in Paris. And my mum had the awful task of reading the letter to me over the phone and explaining that he had passed away. He was only a very young man. This was before I went to Mexico, so I must have been 19 years old, hitchhiking to Madrid for a few weeks with friends before the next year I would have an academic year living in Mexico. But Mum rang me, and she had received a letter from Francois's mother to explain that he had died in very tragic circumstances, of course. What my mum had received was a funeral card with a handwritten cover letter sending an update to me. I had never met his mother. She had never met me, but he had mentioned the long night in a car travelling from Poitiers to Bordeaux several years before, and so she felt moved to make contact with our family. And that memory comes from a note found in a diary from a man I met only once in my life but swapped correspondence with. These were the days before mobile phones and the internet, and very sadly, that's my memory of him. A note left for me at a friend's house, which I picked up on my return from Madrid to Bordeaux and my way home to England before the following year making my way to Mexico. Address books is what I wanted to talk about, but these are how we maintained contact. But an address book made me feel very grown up. I was probably 15 or 16 when I started to keep that. But that was also how I then stayed in contact with friends I met, hitchhiking, youth hosteling, and travelling around the world in different places. But look at the size of these. These are very heavy, large, leather in many cases, pieces of personal stationery, accoutrements to carry and to monitor the things that were at the time important to us. Sort of a diary function, beginning to be a journaling function, but different to these sorts of journals. This is a mid-sized document. I don't know what you would call it. It's not A6. It's not quite A5, but it's useful. This one I carried with me for several years on the Camino de Santiago. So here's an entry from April 2018, so 8 years ago. After an hour in driving rain as we walked from Hurtado de la Vega, we finally arrived at 7 o'clock here at the hotel en el Camino. We felt like we deserved a little bit of luxury. So we've checked into room 103 with 2 single beds, hot showers, and our clothes are already in the laundry. Today we started in Ontanas, having stayed at the Hostel Juan de Yepes, €40 for a 3-course meal and coffee, including accommodation in a tiny 4-person dormitory. But these are memories, these are moments captured in time with pen and paper, part diary, part journal. What's this one? Oh, this is amazing. I remember writing this on the plane. This is the first act of a crime fiction novel, which I've actually finished some years ago. First act, second act, third act. Wow. And I wrote that on the plane on a flight back from Madrid after a week or so walking with my son on the Camino de Santiago. But amazing. I've got things that happen. I've got names of cast. I've got crimes, drug trafficking, a fight, traditional little villages in the rural areas of the Yucatan Peninsula, and luxury hotels. How amazing that such things start as an idea jotted over 2 double pages of a storybook or a journal, and they become something far more significant over time. And look at that. That's me working on the scenes and adding the word count of the scenes as I write through them. So it looks like I've got just under 1,300 words to an average scene. So I've got 15 scenes in Act 1, 30 scenes in Act 2. How did I get on? And at that point I hadn't even written the concluding act of the book, but obviously that was done some time ago now. So how interesting that these things survive and they instantly take us back to a place we've been before. But what I see as interesting now is how something as practical or as simple as a fairly simple Filofax product would allow you to track all the things which were of significance. So a diary, financial records, maintaining track of your projects, little places for adding photographs or trinkets, or as you can see here, this sheet of plastic was to carry perhaps a metro card for the London Underground, a train ticket, maybe a cinema ticket, or whatever you wanted to store for a period of time. Obviously credit cards or bank cards were what they were designed for. But how we moved from a notebook and a separate address book to something more flexible, more adaptable as the Filofax. Adaptable, I say, in the sense that you can add these extra tabs or sheet notes, plastic pockets to hold things, and you could move to a more complex system for carrying everything analog in your pocket, in your blazer, in your work bag or your handbag. And these became de rigueur for much of, I would say, the 1980s and into the early 90s. I've carried on using them for years because I find them helpful. It might be, for example, that this one I will adapt this. I think I will actually this weekend, take out all the blank pages that I've got across various Filofaxes, including these, and I'll transfer them to one which can become a carry item or a desk item. And that will be useful, and I can then dispense of many of the other Filofaxes in the house. Because these days, my moleskins or my Leica notebooks, these are where I keep all my records. What's this one? Okay, so a little diary here, some notes or a focus for video while I'm away. Record in some coffee shops. Beneficio de la Duda, Tierra Garat, Boycott, Ruta de la Seda, the Library, Café Negro, and El Jarocho. So these, just on this page, and there's others here, these are just a series of coffee shops where I thought, I'll do a video about writing in coffee shops in my neighborhood in Mexico. And the simple tick that's on each one shows me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that I was able to include those 5 in a video that I did about writing in coffee shops in Mexico City that's on my channel and has had hundreds of views over the time since it was recorded. So it's funny to look at that entry and see how often an idea that we place in our journal, we transfer ideas using ink or pencil onto paper, and that can become reality. In the same way, a little bit like how I've taken ideas from my Filofax sheets and I've added some positive comments or some thoughtful reflection on something that I wanted to enhance or improve, and that becomes a reality. This everyday carry fills a very interesting gap between where I was as a young man, having carried around little address books, Filofaxes, and jacket diaries like these, which I could carry in my rucksack, but a little bit impractical in case of bad weather, into something like this, a wrist bag, which, as you know now, I have a couple of Laker notebooks in it, and I use these all the time. This is my continual everyday carry. And this one has always been useful because I can consistently carry plenty of little items in it that serve me and help me. So I've got things like a travel card, a solar calculator, I've got some coins in here, I've got places for ticket stubs. I always have a few useful things, such as my earphones, but always a fountain pen and a biro and somewhere to write. The wrist bag fulfills multiple functions that these were not quite enough for. So, for example, Filofax made several little plastic pockets that you could put coins in, but it's starting to get messy. It begins to become a bulky item that is no longer quite so easy to carry or to work with. This has never been surpassed in the items that I've collected over the years that helped me to jot down notes, to carry little documents, to have that calculator or the Metro card in that handy external pocket. But always I've got access to my notebooks. What are you using? What are you carrying? Why does it work? So that's just a little video from my desk this afternoon. Let me show you something from outside the house. This is the old padlock loop on the door that is my writing desk here at home in Yorkshire. As I work at my desk and look out onto the backyard, where you can see the old outbuilding, the old toilet that was there when more than 100 years ago this street was built. But that I'm having converted into a little writing shed because it's already got the space. I can stand up in there. I can stand up on the left-hand side, but I can put a little fold-down desk below the window internally and probably add another window on the right-hand side as we're looking at it here from the living room. And that will just give me a little extra place to go outside of the house. And then I no longer need to have a desk here in the living room. But picking these up again today has really shown me the transition or the arc that I made from school exercise books to little annual diaries that might have had in those days the year embossed on the cover. And you would literally have perhaps a centimetre of height, maybe 2 centimetres, to your daily diary entry, and you'd carry in that in your jacket pocket or your handbag or your work pouch. And that was the diary. The Filofax was a revolutionary item. It doesn't really necessarily look like it now, but it was something that completely overturned the habit of maintaining a diary. And if you had one of these, it was pretty cool, but it showed you that you could maintain accurate records, keep a diary, add blank pages that you would then journal in. I don't think we called it journaling then, it was just personal notes. But looking at the Filofaxes and then seeing where I am nowadays with little A6 pocket notebooks that are far easier to carry, or even these very tiny little slim ones that fit in my wrist pouch and I carry with me, it's been a huge transition from bulky and obvious to small and subtle and easy to carry around.